Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you especially to three students from Lancaster Girls Grammar School who are part of Lancaster Black History Group's Slavery Family Trees Research Project. We welcome Emma, Emily, and Jasmine, and their teacher, Mr. Harry Yonshire from the Girls Grammar School today. Thank you so much for giving up your time during a school lesson to join us. And we look forward to hearing from you about the Lancaster Lindow family. Over to you.
Okay, so first of all, we've got the overall family trees of the Lindow and Rawlinson families, and that's been drawn up by Jasmine. So the figure in the box, or the two boxes, is William Lindow, and he serves as a key link between the two families and was the main proponent of Lancaster slave trade, like within the Lindow family. So he was originally born in Ulverston in 1734, and then William moved to Lancaster in 1752. And then over the course of about the next 20 years, he captained several ships to the West Indies. He worked as a resident for the Rawlinson family in St. Kitts and then later Grenada. And he also became involved in the inter-American slave trade. So by 1771, he was a wealthy Lancaster merchant. He was now a partner of Abraham Rawlinson, and he was married to Abraham's daughter, Abigail. So he began owning ships at this point, transporting enslaved people from Africa to the West Indies, while also becoming the co-owner of several plantations there. So at the time of his death in 1786, he owned property and land in Lancaster, Ulverston, and in the West Indies, which was then inherited by various members of his family. So there's other key figures of the Lindow family involved in the trade or in his legacy, which you can see here. So you have his brother, who was Captain James Lindow, and he captained the slave ship Castleton in 1556. His niece, Elizabeth Christopherson, who inherited Stowmore Hall near Ulverston from Lindow in his will. There's his wife, Abigail Rawlinson, and Abigail's nephew, Henry Lindow Rawlinson, who later changed his name to Henry Lindow, and he inherited William's plantations and received compensation for them in 1834. There's also likely another brother of William and James called Jonathan Lindow, and he was a Lancaster mariner. He married and had a family in Lancaster and died on the African coast in 1757. So there's a couple of other sort of connected figures bearing the Lindow family name whom you don't see here, as they probably aren't direct relatives of William Lindow, but they include John Lindow, who worked as an apprentice for Gillow's furniture makers. There's also a second Captain James Lindow, likely a cousin, who captained the ship Swallow and died in St. Kitts in 1758. The two Captain James Lindows were born around a similar time, but they definitely aren't the same person. William's brother James died much later in 1796, and his will references William Lindow among other known relatives, so it's definitely him. The Swallow is not recorded as having been transporting enslaved people at the time of the second James's death, although there are previous journeys recorded in the early 1750s for a boat of the same name belonging to the Satterthwaite family.
So 3 paintings were painted for William Lindow, and they're all by George Romney, and these can be seen on the screen. So there's one of William Lindow on his own, and this is described as a whole length of himself. And then there's the most famous one, Mr. and Mrs. Lindow, or a conversation of himself and his lady. And then a 3/4 of Mr. Rawlinson, who we assume to be Abraham Rawlinson, Abigail's father. So these were all done in 1772 for number 1 Queen Square, as Lindow's house was being built. So the portrait of William Lindow is held in a private collection. The frame was made by Gillows and was described in 1773 as a very elegant picture frame Carla Marat, which was the first of its kind to be made by Gillows, and it was really expensive, costing 8.5 guineas then, so that would be around £820 today. The next portrait, Mr. and Mrs. Lindow, is held by the Tate Gallery. This was also framed by Gillows, but the original frame has since been replaced. This frame cost £5.08, which would be around £470 today. In this portrait, you can see the sea and ships in the background, clearly alluding to Lindow's seafaring activities as a prominent West Indies merchant and a plantation owner. And since these things were so integral to ensuring his social and economic successes in Lancaster at this time. The death of William Lindow in 1786 resulted in the painting being passed down to Thomas Rawlinson, who is Abigail Rawlinson's brother, and it's written in his will, £5,000 to Thomas Rawlinson, also given household goods, furniture plates, linen, and pictures. So this painting, Mr. and Mrs. Lindow, has also given rise to a few interesting comments. In the Royal Academy catalogue, William Lindow is actually wrongly identified as Thomas Lindow. And a piece published in the local press in 1892 commented on the portrait, producing an amusing effect. The writer describes Abigail holding up her skirt with one hand to make it seem as though his legs, which are in front, were really hers. And that we laughed heartily at this bit of comic accidental posing. However, the reputation of the portrait seems to change a bit because in 1893, the Times actually proclaimed it as a capital example of the artist's early manner. These paintings are essentially a visual display of William Lindow's attempts to assert himself as a gentleman of Lancaster, and it gives us an insight into how he wished to be viewed by society and his pride in rising to become the prominent, successful West Indies merchant that we see in the painting. All right.
William Lindow, as well as being a prominent merchant in Lancaster and a prominent figure, also had many connections to the slave trade, but firstly he was a slave trader. So important to that is the fact he was a transatlantic slave ship part owner, and the transatlantic trade is the trade between Britain to Africa, taking goods to trade for slaves, taking those slaves across to the Americas to sell, using the money to buy slave goods and then bringing them back up to Britain. And so William Lindow part-owned 2 ships which were involved in this trade. The Portland, which made 2 voyages during the 1770s from Liverpool, purchasing slaves on the Windward Coast in Africa and selling them in the West Indies. And the Sarah, which made 1 voyage from Liverpool in 1772, purchasing slaves in the Sierra Leone estuary and selling them in Grenada. Lindow Square behind Girls' Grammar is named after William Lindow, and interestingly, just off Lindow Square is a street named Portland Street, which we could speculate to be named after that slave ship, but we can't be certain. And William Lindow was also linked to the inter-American trade, which is the trade between the Americas, so transporting slaves between islands. And this was at a similar time. He owned 2 ships. One was the Hobby Horse, which did 2 voyages under a William Lindow between Grenada and Dominica, and 1 recorded under a William London. But as it's the same ship, tonnage and time period, we can assume it's the same. It is William Lindow. He also owned 2 Friends, which was a ship that made 2 voyages, one which he owned with William Deal and one later, which he just owned himself. All the other owners and captains that William was involved in through both these trades are explored in these tables I've created, and all the data comes from the Slave Voyage database, which is just the Bible on this stuff. Some of the men explored include James Saury, who owned or part-owned 18 transatlantic voyages, which is the most I've seen in these people, and 14 from Lancaster, which is again a very high number. One of these ships is called the Fenton, and I've also speculated that Fenton Street, just off High Street, could possibly be named after that, but again, you can never really be certain. And James also captained 4 transatlantic voyages from Liverpool. His link to William Lindow is the fact he part-owned and captained the Sarah at the same time as William Lindow owned it. Another man explored is Samuel Gowith, part-owner and captain of the Portland when William Lindow was owner. He part-owned 6 transatlantic ships and captained 10, which is still really quite high. One of those captained is called the Blossom, and this is one of very few voyages recorded to depart from Preston. And it's the only one recorded on the database, but that's probably an issue with the database rather than fact. One interesting voyage recorded is the ship the Vestal, which was part-owned by John Benson, who was linked through the Portland to William Lindow. And on the database, it's recorded as being taken, retaken, and salvaged before reaching African trade site. So this is probably the result of rivalries between countries. taking ships off each other as prizes and then being taken back. But in the end, the voyage was completed successfully. Some other information I've compiled and explored includes the names of captains and ships associated and death tolls on voyages, or average death tolls. And some of William Lindow's death tolls on his ships are interestingly high.
So here you can see the information about the plantations that William Lindow and then later Henry Lindow owned. So at the top, there's information about how William came to own the plantations, as well as the only known names of some of the enslaved people whom he purchased, who's obviously a representative of a lot more names that were lost. The first table includes data on the enslaved people that Henry owned, as this information isn't available before 1834. Although William Lindow's will confirms that he was the original owner of both the plantations listed, and that he left his shares to Henry, who consequently changed his name to Lindow as a result.
Hello.
The second table includes the information on the compensation claims made by Henry Lindow in 1834 for the 2 estates he co-owned at that point, as well as how much money he received and its rough equivalent value in 2017.
Number 1 Queen Square is located right outside the entrance to Lancaster Girls Grammar School sixth form, and it's now been converted into flats. In this photo, you can see the main house, but also the wing. This house was built and furnished for William Lindow by local architect Richard Gillow from 1772 to 1773. William Lindow had recently married Abigail Lindow in late 1771 and was probably keen to impress his wife and her father with the new build. Abigail was the daughter of the successful Lancaster merchant Abraham Rawlinson, as we've heard, and the marriage would suggest that Lindow and Rawlinson had a good-natured relationship, as the two men subsequently began trading together under the same name, Abraham Rawlinson, Sons and Lindow, from 1773. The house had this new wing added from 1774 to 6, and this is the other part of the house that you can see in the photo that was then altered in the 19th century. A warehouse was also built from 1774 to 6, and it was common practice for merchants in the 1700s to build warehouses to store goods adjacent to their dwelling house. The attic rooms, coach house, or stable wing of number 1 Queen Square could also perhaps have been lived in by John Chance. John Chance was a servant, a black servant described in the St Mary Parish Registers from 1755 to 85 as a black man aged 22 years and upwards in the service of Mr. Lindow, who we assume to be William Lindow, and this was dated the 12th of September 1777. John Chance's burial is listed as being on the 8th of October 1783, and unfortunately we know little of his life as a servant of the Lindows. In trying to do a bit of research on what Black people living in Britain at this time may have experienced, we can maybe speculate that John Chance was used as a status symbol, living a life of limited freedom whilst in Lancaster. But of course, Black people in Britain's lives probably vary dramatically, so we can't really be sure. We've also discovered the record of a John Lindow, another Black man living in Lancaster in the 18th century. However, we don't have enough evidence currently to prove his link to the Lindow family, as he was baptised after William Lindow's death. The attic rooms in number 1 Queen Square still retain their original dividing wall between what was probably 2 servants' rooms, most likely occupied by 2 servants of Abigail Lindow, Elizabeth Gardner and Anne Hurd, to who Abigail left £10 each in her will. Gillows not only designed number 1 Queen Square, but they also furnished much of the interior, sourcing quality mahogany from Jamaica in particular, purchased from Rawlinson and Co., ensuring that Lindow received the very best wooden furniture. Some of the original plasterwork also remains today around the staircase. Gillow supplied a set of carved mouldings to go around the chimney room, as well as 2 vases, side pieces, other tables, a snap table, a tea table, mahogany cupboard doors and ornaments. Number 1 Queen Square and Lindow's plantations abroad was subsequently inherited by his nephew, Henry Lindow, son of Abigail's brother, Henry Rawlinson.
So this is the first or one of the first properties that William Lindow purchased, and it's Stowmore Hall in Ulverston. And that's largely significant as it's kind of considered the ancestral birthplace of Quakerism. So he bought it in 1759 while still working as a resident for the Rawlinsons and not yet remotely as affluent as he would become sort of a decade or two later, making it quite an unusual purchase, especially considering Lindow was not a Quaker, although he did business with lots of Quaker families, including the Rawlinsons. Although the Abraham family he purchased it from was struggling with a lot of debt at the time, the hall still costs Lindow £7,000, which is about 700,000 today. So it's most likely that he bought it with funds from his early investments in the bilateral and inter-American slave trades. He left the hall to Elizabeth Christopherson, his orphan niece, in his will, and it must have stayed within the family throughout the 19th century, as William Fletcher Lindow sold the hall back to a descendant of the Abraham family in 1912.
So, as we've seen, the Lindow family are ingrained in Lancaster's history, society, and economy, and their ties to the slave trade are important to the city even today, so they should be known by the public of Lancaster. This trail attempts to do this by being kind of a lasting output of our research, and some of the sites visited are shown on the PowerPoint. So the top left shows the Rawlinson House on High Street. The families are linked, obviously Lindow and the Rawlinsons, through William Lindow's wife Abigail. Business and Abraham Rawlinson and William Lindow obviously business together. The house was also designed by Richard Gillow, like One Queen Square, and part of the house was built on land William Lindow sold to the Rawlinsons. The next one's Portland Street, which you said is possibly named after the slave ship, and it's also very close to Lindow Square. The next one is the Gillows house. Richard Gillow designed One Queen Square, and Gillows and Co furnished it, and the frames of the portraits were also Gillows. The Gillows also have extensive ties to the slave trade in other ways. The next one is the Captured Africans Memorial on the Quay. That records Captain James Lindow, William's brother, as captain of the Castleton. And this memorial also helps to commemorate those people affected by the Lindow family in the slave trade, transported or who lost their lives. And so it's really important. Bottom left, the Rawlinson Memorial in the Priory. William Lindow and Abigail are both buried here, and the graffiti on it shows people's perception of the slave trade and Lancaster's involvement today. The Queen Square sign is just by One Queen Square, the house of William Lindow and Abigail and John Chance. Then there's Lindow Street, which is named after William Lindow. This is probably because of donations or contributions to society, such as he donated £200 to the building of Glovden Dock. And then the last one is Judge's Lodgings, which has housed relevant paintings to the family. This trail also highlights other linked places to the Lindow family, which are too far to be included, such as Grenada and St. Vincent in the Caribbean, which is where William Lindow owned plantations, and also he sold slaves here due to the transatlantic slave trade and the inter-American trade. And also Stowmore Hall, owned by William Lindow and inherited by Elizabeth Christopherson, and is all of importance to Quakerism. And then Liverpool Docks, where all of William Lindow's transatlantic part-owned ships embarked from. The amount of places that are linked to Lindows just shows how many links the slave trade has to Lancaster and how important the Lindows are in that link and how important this history is to be known. So the trail should act as kind of a summary or output of all our research, and it'll be used by the public, hopefully, and maybe even girls' grammar as part of the history curriculum. So in conclusion, exploring the life of William Lindow, his properties, family, and plantations highlights the way in which society at this time in Lancaster was so intertwined with the West Indies trade. Many aspects of William Lindow's life became almost inescapable from and dependent on slave ships and economies, shown by the background in the painting of Mr. and Mrs. Lindow. Number 1 Queen Square was built and furnished primarily from profits gained from slavery, showing Lancaster's global connections in the late 18th and 19th centuries through merchants and owners of both slave ships and plantations, and also the Gillows Company through the mahogany trade. The house was importantly the dwelling of John Chance, the servant whose life as a young man and voice in history was lost as a consequence of the slave trade. Creating the family tree displays the connections between the Rawlinsons and Lindows that resulted in the partnership that enabled William Lindow's social and economic success as a West Indies merchant.
Thanks so much for that, Emily, Emma, and Jasmine. I was wondering whether Mr. Yernshaw was there with you, and if he wanted to just step in and say a few words. Sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Yernshaw, but if you are wanting to just kind of share how this research has, as students from your school, has impacted what you are hoping to do in the school, we would love to hear from you.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, we've always taught transatlantic slavery in our curriculum. We do that in year 8. And we've always taught in a very general sense about Lancaster's involvement and role within it. And really through this project, what we've been able to do myself is find out a lot more through the girls' research, and also just an inspiration for me to find out more about Lancaster's history within this. And so what we've done is actually already this year, we've changed our year 8 curriculum because of this. And the whole focus is now we have like a big overriding question. We probably study it for about 5 hours, 6 hours in total lesson time. And the focus is really the big question is, can we learn everything we need to know about the transatlantic slave trade from Lancaster's history? And sort of in a way, the answer is it's a rhetorical question, but the answer is no, but you can learn a heck of a lot. And I think what we found is that's really being able to bring home to students already, you know, with what is sort of, we've introduced it this year, and we're going to review it and improve it and bring more of the research in that our students and hopefully others from the Black History Group have done. And just show them really that the details of this, the reality of it, but also this was right here on their doorstep, the town in which they live, you know, and that things that have shaped the world today the way they are in all sorts of ways have been, you know, in terms of the slave trade, the Industrial Revolution, you know, the Northwest is at the heart of this global change really, and that Lancaster is a really key part of it. So a lot of students had perhaps a little bit of general awareness of that, but not really any precise detail. And, you know, just sat there when I'm listening to the students again, you know, I know some of these facts, but when you sit and listen to them and think about them again, they're quite incredible and really, you know, shocking. And I think that's what a lot of our students are finding. And they've been, you know, we've got quite a lot of students who were involved in Black Lives Matter protests last year and are still active. And I think they're appreciating finding out more background to some of the issues that we face in the world today and where they came from and the origins of racism and things like that. It really is back to the slave trade and imperialism. So it's been really interesting for me. Personally, I haven't done huge amounts of research. I've had it quite easy, really. I've just enjoyed coming along to meetings, trying to offer a little bit of advice and support, and just really being inspired by the way in which the girls have got into it, what they found out, and I've learned a lot. And as a teacher, that I really enjoy doing that, because you know, you're always teaching, and I think lots of teachers really like to be taught and find things out. So the really nice thing is that my students are teaching me, have taught me loads of things. So it's a really nice way of doing things that I've never done it before, where you actually have students who are really sort of building the curriculum in many ways for other students. So and hopefully, you know, being able to myself come along to the conference in November and see what I'd be really interested to see about the other family trees and research and groups that have been going on in Lancaster, and hopefully we can then bring some of that into our curriculum as well. But having that Lindow focus has been really powerful, because, you know, if I'm been teaching the last few weeks about this, and I say, look, just look out the window there. Can you see that building there? Oh yeah, you know that one you walk past every day. Okay, right, let's have a look at this. Let's find out about this. And you get quite a lot of students open-mouthed. They can't really quite believe the stories they're hearing. So I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of it, and just seeing what the students have done has been quite inspirational, really.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yanchan. Thank you very much to the school and to you for giving of your time throughout these last 6 months. It's over to everyone for questions. Emma and Emily and Jasmine would be very happy to take any questions. But thank you so much also to Sewing Cafe for hosting this and giving them this chance to present. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very, wow.
Yeah.
What is the most impressive thing that you feel or found after your research?
I feel like Portland Street and its possible link to the slave ship, the Portland, I think it is possibly.
It's quite shocking, the fact that you might walk past it every day, or you might even live on it, and you wouldn't know if you weren't told. I mean, just going on that slave voyages database the first time and seeing that there were 2,000 pages of slave voyages was like shocking. I wouldn't have guessed, and that a lot of them went from Lancaster. That was quite amazing, and it's not in depth, but that was really quite amazing for me.
I think for me, it might have been learning about Stowmore Hall, because sort of as a Quaker myself, I hear a lot of things about Stowmore Hall, and none of them are. And here's the period of time when it was owned by a slave trader. It kind of, the idea that there was a period where, and I think it's indicative of a lot of sort of money that was kind of intertwined with both Quakerism and the slave trade at that period of time, and it kind of leaves the question open as to where it went next, and quite possibly it didn't go anywhere. So that was a big shock for me. I mean, I was aware, but you get a lot of the sort of Quakers and abolition movement kind of go hand in hand, but that's it wasn't the whole story, and learning about that was really the biggest thing for me.
Emma?
Thank you. Yeah, not Andrew Gibson, Emma. Thank you for that. It was really powerful, and congrats to Mr. Earnshaw as well, because I don't remember my history lessons being that powerful. So I can ask you an opinion question, if you don't mind, Emma, Emily and Jasmine, because there's quite a lot of debate ongoing, isn't there, about changing the names of places where we know that they're linked to the slave trade. And like the Sugar House, I guess, is the big local debate. And so I just wonder, from your learning as part of this research and the powerful impact that, I used to live on Portland Street, and when I saw your table, just as you were saying, we may speculate as its proximity, it's, I was saying to my husband, do you think our old street was named after a slave ship? It does kind of hit you. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about, is it a good thing to change the names of places like Lindow or Portland, or has your research given you a view one way or the other?
For me, to change them sometimes might feel like you're kind of covering it up, and if they're there and you're learning about them, it makes you want to know more. I think the fact that they are named after slave things makes me more interested to learn more about it, and for a lot of people I think that would be a bit of a push to learn about the history, so it might be quite useful in that way. as a way to say to people, well, you might live on a street that's named after a slave trader or something, and they're like, well, I might want to know a bit more about that then. But also just change the name does try and maybe heal what's happened. So it really depends how it's done. If it is done, it needs to be done carefully with the proper research and the proper understanding of exactly what it was, because I think recently there's been quite a lot of things about that street's named after this, and then actually it hasn't been. And then it's just, yeah, so if it is done, it needs to be done carefully, and maybe it's in a way a good thing, because then it makes people want to know more about their history, and then they can understand really issues today.
I think that with changing the names of streets and buildings and things, it's really saying that we shouldn't be commemorating these terrible things that have happened. I think that's really the big thing with changing the name. But then, like Emily said, I think it is important that people really learn about the history and really like address what took place in order to kind of like heal the past. So I think it is important that it's done in the right way, and that the history behind why the place was originally named that should be like properly communicated.
I feel like there is a benefit to having the names be a part of Lancaster kind of so physically. But I personally, for myself, I don't feel like I've ever learnt history from a street sign. So I think if they're kept and we acknowledge them as a part of Lancaster's history, then that comes hand in hand with sort of blue plaques and more information, and like a whole host of ways in which it kind of goes beyond just a street sign. And I think it's also equally valid to argue that kind of Lindow Street might kind of, I don't know, be better named Chance Street, and that maybe better reflects the person that we want to remember who's associated with that name. So yeah, there's arguments either way for that.
No, thank you. So much to think about. It's really valuable.
We have a couple of comments in the chat as well. I don't know if anyone wants to read, or maybe Virginia and Carol want to say it aloud.
Just that I'm blown away by the way you've approached this, your intelligence, your ability to research it, put it together in such a complete, comprehensive way. Just well done. You know, that people like you are going to be part of our future is great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting, and it's been really quite rewarding doing it, because you've really found out about your history and the history of your town, and I think that's really important. Yeah,
it has been incredibly useful experience with all the researching, and even this presenting. It is, yeah, it's all really good.
Virginia?
Well, I'd like to echo what Carol just said. I am absolutely amazed. So inspiring to see some young women who are so accomplished and articulate and confident, and just able to tell us such a lot of really detailed research and put it over in a really interesting way. I've only lived in Lancaster for just over 2 years, and I love all of this information because it helps me so much to feel and to know and to understand what I'm walking through. And it's, you know, obviously it's got a history, and it's really important that we acknowledge that. And I think you have such lovely balanced views about things like street names and stuff too. As Carol said, if you are the future, and you are, then the future's safe in your hands. Well done. I'm just blown away. I have nothing but admiration for what you've done today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we are really grateful for this opportunity that we've been given to try and shape Lancaster's future and help other people address the past. Any other
Candy?
questions? Yeah.
Candy, you raise your hand.
No, no, sorry. No, I wasn't raising my hand. I was clapping because I agree with Virginia and Carol and probably everyone else who these lovely girls have done a fantastic job. And yes, and as Carol said, is the future is in your hands. We should rest and then let you get on with it. You've done a fantastic job, girls. That's why I have been clapping the whole time. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again.
That's okay.
Yeah, and Black History Group is just amazing how you just go. I mean, this is one proof that how important the project is. So thank you for that as well. It's just very powerful to be here and see it. So yeah, thank you very much.
So Victoria, have we got
Yeah.
more? As in more storytelling sessions?
Yes. So we were just talking about that. Sunita's been saying that in first week of September, probably.
Yes, second week of September, the Lancaster Royal Grammar School students. So there are 7 stories, 7 families, maybe 8 families actually, because one group started with a family called the Bond family. And then they discovered that there is another family called the Booker family, which is associated with the Booker Prize, which is associated with Lancaster and Overkellet. Many people don't know about this link. And so they've branched into doing 2 stories. So we done the Satterthwaite story last month, and this month is Lindow. So what Victoria was suggesting that maybe we would work for us is perhaps to do one every month over the next few months after the summer. So we're really grateful to Sewing Cafe for giving us this opportunity and for collaborating, because I wondered, Victoria, whether you wanted to share with the group about, because this particular story has a link to the banner that you're making. If you wanted to just share what you're up to as a group.
Okay, so we, as some of you might know, the reason we started doing this because we in Café Lancaster are making a banner representing all the stories from this project. I'm going to find, so the design, we just let me find it. Is that okay, guys, if I show the design and the progress? Where's Sewing Cafe think about it?
Yes, yes, I think that's good. That's good. It's so beautiful, and it'll show the links, Victoria. I think it's really good. Show it.
Okay, this is the design. John is here. As you can see, this is number 1, Queen Square, and this is John. We haven't got much information about him, as you were saying. It's difficult to know exactly. I mean, they are not celebrated, so we don't know much about the way he looked like or anything else. So can you see him here?
Yeah, it looks incredible.
Yeah,
it really sums everything up perfectly. Yeah.
So we have John here. I don't know if you're familiar with the other stories. So we got the building. So this is the costume house. We have Frances here in the Priory with the story, the hand, Sugar House Alley. We have even Mary Brooker, who was a sailmaker at the time. We have a couple of runaway stories, which is Ibo Boy on the left, and then we have Thomas. And then we have Molly, where this woman is representing different women. We don't know much about them, but we know we got 3 names, which is Molly, Rebecca, and Frances. Then we have Africa getting empty of people, and then we have the rebellion, the Mero Rebellion, and then we have America here, south and north, and then the main goods that were brought to here. I mean, this is just the representation of it. I can show you the process. So we started, we had worked on it for the last, I mean, I think we've spent about 16 hours work now doing but we are very excited about it. Let's see.